Now, members, I call on the Minister for Finance, Deputy Michael Noonan, to make his budget statement. Deputy Noonan.
Ceann Comhairle. This is the 6th budget I have introduced since 2011. Since then, the country has overcome huge challenges that many people thought were insurmountable. The lessons learned over that period must not be forgotten. We must budget prudently while we prioritise the repair of our public services after a period of underinvestment. We will be true to the commitments we made in the programme for government. We will divide the resources available between increased investment in public services and tax cuts in proportions of at least 2 to 1 in favour of public services. The economy is in good shape, it is growing strongly, and sustainable growth is forecast for the coming years. My department, with the endorsement of the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council, is forecasting that GDP will grow by 4.2% in 2016 and by 3.5% in 2017. The strength of our economy is even better understood when you look at employment. There are over 2 million people at work this year, and my department is forecasting that there will be a further 43,000 people at work by the end of 2017. Employment is still short of what it reached in 2007, but it is far more solidly based, with jobs being created across all sectors of the economy rather than being dependent on one overblown sector. As the numbers at work continue to grow to well beyond 2 million persons, it is salutary to remember that as recently as 1989, less than 1.1 million people were at work in Ireland. The growth of the economy has been mirrored in the public finances. We have moved from a completely unsustainable position depending on the Troika and the bailout programme to our current sustainable position. We have built our tax revenues and we have been able to invest more in public services. We will continue on this path. Today I am announcing changes to the tax system that will reduce the burden on taxpayers by just under 300 million. These changes consist of about 500 million of tax cuts that are offset by measures increasing tax revenue worth 195 million. My colleague, Minister Pascal will shortly outline the allocation of gross voted expenditure for 2017 of 58 billion. This includes 1 billion of additional allocations above the amount pre-committed in line with the mid-year expenditure report. Overall, the budget package of 1.3 billion favours expenditure increases over revenue reductions by over 3 to 1. This reflects the government's commitment to rebuilding and investing in public services. In headline terms, the projected deficit for this year is 0.9% of GDP, and taking account of the budget package, the forecast for 2017 is a budget deficit of 0.4% of GDP. In structural terms, the metric by which our obligations under the Stability and Growth Pact are set and measured, the forecast is that there will be an improvement in the structural balance of 0.8% of GDP, in excess of the 0.6% of GDP that we are required to do under the Stability and Growth Pact. This will leave us with a structural balance of 1.1% of GDP at the end of 2017, and we will be well set to reach our structural deficit target of minus 0.5% in 2018, and better placed to deal with any external shocks or challenges which may occur. The United Kingdom's decision to exit the European Union represents a real risk to our economy, given the close links and the high level of trade between us. Around 16% of Irish exports go to the UK, but 40% of indigenous company exports go there. In turn, Ireland is the UK's 5th biggest export market. Over 1.2 billion of goods and services are exchanged between the two countries on a weekly basis. This trade supports 400,000 jobs, split evenly between the two islands, with many more jobs in the supply chain dependent on this trade. The uncertainty introduced to the economic outlook by the United Kingdom's decision has prompted my department to reduce its forecast for GDP growth for next year to 3.5%. What the effect will ultimately be will depend on the settlement between the UK and the European Union. It is not possible to forecast the impact of this at present. The best outcome for Ireland is a United Kingdom that is still closely linked to the European Union. We want to avoid any move towards a hard border with Northern Ireland, or indeed any changes that reverse what is a common economy on this island. We also want to see the preservation of the common travel area, which also means the preservation of the common labour market. Whatever the final settlement, what we know with certainty is that Brexit has increased risk to the Irish economy, and as well as introducing specific measures to assist particular sectors of the economy, we must also put in place safety nets to protect us against future economic shocks. The best and most immediate policy under our own control to mitigate this risk is to control the public finances through the budgetary process. We need to keep faith with the prudent fiscal policy we have followed for the 5 previous budgets. Through this budget and beyond, we must reduce and eliminate the current budget deficit, balance the budget in 2018 and run budgetary surpluses after that date. Secondly, we must put in place economic shock absorbers to enable us to deploy resources to reduce or eliminate the impact of future economic shocks. In the summer economic statement, I announced that when the budget is in surplus after 2018, it is the government's intention to establish a contingency fund or a rainy day fund, and I confirm this today. The government will set aside an amount of up to €1 billion annually to this fund to be deployed by the government of the day in a counter-cyclical manner. Our high level of national debt is also a risk to our future well-being. The national debt peaked at 120% of GDP during the crisis. It will be down to 76% of GDP at the end of this year, and we will continue to reduce it to achieve the target of 60% of GDP in accordance with the European Stability and Growth Pact. At this level of debt, however, I believe there is still risk. Ireland is a small open economy. We depend on international trade. An economic shock in any region of the world impacts on us. Therefore, I am announcing today a new debt-to-GDP target beyond the requirements of the Stability and Growth Pact. The Government has decided to set a new domestic target of debt-to-GDP ratio of 45% to be reached by the mid-2020s or thereafter, depending on economic growth. This will allow future governments to not only apply the rainy day fund, but to borrow to mitigate the impact of future shocks on the lives of our people. We must get away from, forever, the boom and bust cycles that have caused so much grief in this country in the past. If we do so, we can build a great economy, we can build a fair and just society, and we can build the kind of country we all aspire to. In addition to the macroeconomic policies I have outlined, I now want to announce a series of measures to assist sectors of the economy which may be adversely affected by Brexit. I am extending the Special Assignee Relief Programme and the Foreign Earnings Deduction until the end of 2020. And in relation to the foreign earnings deduction, I am also reducing the minimum number of days required to be spent abroad from 40 to 30 to help smaller business to identify and trade in such markets. The tourism and the hospitality industry has recovered well and is now performing strongly, due in no small part to the reduced VAT rate I introduced during our last term of office. Though the economic rationale for maintaining this reduced rate may not be as strong today, I consider it would be prudent to retain the reduced rate in this year's budget. This will act as a buffer for the sector against the weakness in sterling, which increases the cost of holidaying in Ireland for British tourists. I am extending the Start Your Own Business scheme for a further 2 years. Its continuation will be of real benefit in providing support to long-term unemployed persons who wish to create new businesses. I am improving the revised entrepreneur relief I introduced in the budget last year by reducing the 20% rate of capital gains tax to 10%, on disposals of qualifying assets up to a limit of 1 million in chargeable gains. I will review the 1 million lifetime span in future budgets. All other aspects of the relief remain unchanged. I think we all know and appreciate that farming and the agri-food sector has been going through a tough time recently due to lower world prices and also due to the adverse weather conditions we had during the summer. Brexit and the subsequent weakness in sterling strongly impacts on the agri-food sector. This poses a competitive challenge for farmers and the agri-food companies that sell a great deal of their output into the UK market. Today I am announcing a package of measures to assist the sector. I introduced a range of measures in past budgets to assist the development of the sector and to help with the transfer of farms from one generation to the next. To assist in the current difficult circumstances, I am allowing a farmer facing an exceptionally poor year to step out of income averaging and instead pay only the tax due on a current year basis, with any deferred tax liability becoming payable over subsequent years. This facility will be available immediately and should provide cash flow assistance this year. The flat rate addition for farmers not registered for VAT is being increased from 5.2% to 5.4%, with effect from the 1st of January 2017. The scheme, which is reviewed annually in accordance with the EU VAT directive, compensates unregistered farmers for VAT incurred on their farming inputs. In Budget 2013, I introduced farmer structuring relief to run to the end of 2015. And in Budget 2015, I extended the relevant period to the end of this year. Today, I am extending it to the end of 2019. The term of the reliefs hasn't changed. To further support farmers, my colleague, Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Michael Creed, will be utilising EU Exceptional Adjustment Aid to develop, in conjunction with the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, a loan fund that will be low cost, below 3% per annum, and highly flexible. These loans will enable farmers to improve the management of their cash flow and reduce the cost of their short-term borrowings. Minister Creed will announce the details later. I am extending the scheme of accelerated capital allowances for investment in energy-efficient equipment to sole traders. This implements the final recommendation of the Agri-Tax Review and will help businesses in the farming and the marine sector to invest in energy-efficient equipment and to receive the full allowance in the first year. This will help to contribute to the achievement of our climate change targets. I wish to inform the House that payments under the new raised bog restoration incentive scheme to relevant owners and rights holders will be exempt from capital gains tax. In recognition of the difficult nature of the work in the fishing sector, I am introducing an income tax credit for fishermen. This follows on from recommendations made in the Marine Tax Review completed last year. This measure is aimed to assist the viability of the fishing industry and at attracting and retaining staff. The 1,270 annual credit will shelter income of up to 6,350, which is the equivalent value of the seafarer's exemption. I'd like now to turn to the housing situation, which I think many colleagues across the House have regarded as a priority for action by the government. There's an acute shortage of new houses being built in Ireland, and I am introducing a Help to Buy scheme to address this problem. In all markets, supply increases to meet demand, and the Help to Buy scheme will increase the demand for newly built houses by assisting first-time buyers to put a deposit together. I expect the building industry to meet this additional demand by increasing the supply of new affordable homes. The Help to Buy scheme is designed as follows. The scheme will provide a rebate of income tax paid over the previous 4 tax years up to a maximum of 5% of the purchase price of the new house, up to a value of 400,000 to first-time buyers of new houses. Pro rata rates will apply to lower priced houses, and a full rebate calculated on 400,000 will also apply to houses in excess of 400,000 and up to 600,000. No rebate will be paid on house purchases in excess of 600,000. I have discussed the proposed scheme with the Governor of the Central Bank, and he has agreed that any rebate received under the scheme will be reckoned in full in the calculation of the deposit required to be eligible for a mortgage under the Central Bank's macroprudential rules. The scheme will apply to the purchase of newly built primary residences by first-time buyers from the 19th of July this year, when it was first announced in principle, until the end of 2019. Second-hand properties are not included in the Help to Buy measures because it would not increase the supply. The supply of second-hand houses is fixed. But I am extending the home renovation incentive scheme by 2 years to the end of 2018. This measure provides tax relief to homeowners who undertake renovations. This improves the quality and often expands the size of their dwelling. The lack of supply of new houses also impacts on the rental sector, and I am announcing a number of new measures to help to increase the supply of rental accommodation. Interest deductibility for residential property landlords was restricted to 75% in 2009 as part of the measures introduced to rescue the public finances. It is an appropriate time to revisit this measure in the context of the housing crisis. In light of the incentive I introduced last year to support landlords who let their property to social housing tenants for a minimum period of 3 years, I am going to restore full interest deductibility for other landlords on a phase basis. And my first step is to increase the level from 75% to 80% in 2017. I will increase it by instalments of 5% each year until the full 100% deductibility is restored, and this will be reflected in the provisions of the forthcoming finance bill. In 2015, I increased the income ceiling that applies under the rental room scheme by 2,000. I am increasing it by a further 2,000 this year to bring it to 14,000 per annum. This will allow homeowners to rent out additional rooms at current average rental prices while remaining within the scope of the scheme. Increased availability of rooms should be particularly helpful to third-level students. In other words, a homeowner who rents rooms to 2 young people, to 2 students, can have an income of 14,000 per annum, which will not be eligible for income tax, or to which income tax will not apply. The Living City initiative I introduced to encourage urban renewal and promote the renovation of centre properties for residential and commercial use has been reviewed as promised in the programme for partnership government. In light of the review being published today, I am expanding the scope of the initiative by including landlords and by removing the cap on maximum floor size. I'd like to turn now to personal taxes. High marginal tax rates act as a brake on employment. They discourage people from taking jobs and discourage immigrants from returning home. As you all know, I have limited resources to change the situation in this budget, but it is important to continue the process I started in Budget 2015 and to signal the policy path forward. Accordingly, I am allocating $335 million to improve the take-home pay of low and middle income earners by reducing each of the lower 3 USC rates by 0.5%. Therefore, the 1% rate will go down to 0.5%, the 3% rate will go down to 2.5%, and the 5.5% rate will go down to 5%. I am also making a small but important increase to the ceiling of the band on which the reduced 2.5% rate of USC will be payable, from 18,668 to 18,772. This increase will ensure that the salary of full-time workers on the minimum wage will remain outside the top rates of USC. This is to take account of the small increase in the minimum wage. Though relatively small, these changes will have a material impact on the disposable income of lower and middle income earners. More importantly, it signals that the government's intent to phase out the USC over time as resources permit. The impact on different levels of income is reflected in the distributional tables published in the budget book. Building on last year, I am increasing the home carers credit by €100 to bring it to 1,100. This will further assist one-income families who care for children or elderly persons at home. It is in a measure that will benefit savers. I am reducing dirt tax by 2% each year for the next 4 years. This will reduce dirt from 41% to 33% by 2020. I think you all know the arguments for this, and I'd like to do more, but on this occasion, this is what's affordable, and it's not just a promise. We will put the provisions of this into the finance bill also, so further reductions will automatically occur. Last year, I narrowed the tax differential between the self-employed and those in the PAYE system by introducing the Earned Income Tax Credit. I want to continue to make progress in this area again this year by increasing it by €400, bringing the total exemption to €950. This will benefit over 147,000 self-employed individuals, generating business activity across the country. Employee participation in their company's ownership and profits has shown to increase competitiveness and support employment and growth. My department carried out a public consultation and review of share-based remuneration earlier this year. In light of the review, I am announcing today my intention to develop a new SME-focused, share-based incentive scheme to be introduced in Budget 2018. Such an incentive will require the approval of the European Commission, and my officials will commence engagement with the Commission to ensure that the incentive will comply with state aid rules in advance of the next budget. During the crisis, it proved necessary to reduce the threshold at which capital acquisitions tax applied to preserve the level of revenue as far as possible. Our improving economy means that increasing asset prices has resulted in higher tax demands when family homes are being passed from one generation to the next. To help address this, the Category A threshold that applies to inheritance and gifts from parents to their children is being increased by 30,000 to 310,000, and I am increasing the Category B and C thresholds also by 8%. And again, it's setting out on a policy which I intend to pursue in the future, so I will revisit these thresholds in the coming years with a view to increasing them further. I want now to state, lest there is any doubt, that Ireland's 12.5% corporation tax rate will not be changed, and nobody in Europe or anywhere else is asking for it to be changed. It is an important part of the reason why we are an attractive destination for foreign direct investment, and the UK's exit from the European Union may present opportunities to attract businesses that may move out of the UK or considering locating there in the coming years. In addition, we have a highly educated workforce and a business-friendly environment. Other major advantages include being an English-speaking economy in the Eurozone and the fact that there is already a critical mass in the financial services and other key sectors in this country. Today I am publishing an update of our international tax strategy that shows the progress that we have made over the past 12 months and highlights how our corporate tax regime meets the highest standards in tax transparency. It restates our commitment to meet our new international tax principles and demonstrates how we will ensure our corporate tax regime remains fair but also competitive into the future. In 2014, my department published a review of corporation tax policy. Since then, there have been many developments in international taxation, including the OECD base erosion and profit sharing initiatives, and legislative proposals from the European Union. In this context, Ireland needs to ensure that our corporate tax code continues to meet international standards, while also delivering tax certainty for business and to maintaining our competitiveness. In line with our established practice of carrying out periodic reviews of key areas of tax policy, the Government announced in September that a review of our corporation tax code would be carried out. I am appointing Mr Seamus Coffey as an independent expert to undertake the review, and its terms of reference will be published today. A number of concerns have been raised about Section 110 of the Taxes Consolidation Act 1997. When this section was introduced, the intention was that it would benefit the financial services industry, and it has done so. It is now being used in relation to property in a way that was never intended. I have published draft amendments to Section 110 to address these unintended uses. I am aware that further amendments are necessary to address other issues arising in relation to funds and property. I will publish these in the Finance Bill after appropriate consultation has taken place. Charities are exempt from VAT under the EU VAT Directive and as a result cannot recover VAT incurred on goods and services that they produce. My department and the Irish Charities Tax Reform Group produced a report on the issue last year to examine how charities might be compensated in this regard. I have asked my officials to engage again with the group with a view to reviewing the options. Climate change is the global challenge of our generation. Work has been ongoing across government departments to create Ireland's first national mitigation plan to transition Ireland to a low-carbon economy by 2050. To assist the transition to a low-carbon economy, I am extending the relief for vehicle registration tax on electric vehicles for a period of 5 years, giving the motor industry and motorists the confidence to invest in this cleaner technology. I am extending the VRT relief for hybrid vehicles for 2 years. I am commencing a measure to help reduce the dependence of larger vehicles on diesel, to provide that natural gas used as a vehicle fuel will be taxed at the EU minimum rate of excise for a period of 8 years. I am commencing a relief from carbon tax for solid fuels that include a biomass element to incentivise the development of these greener fuels. And I am fully relieving fuel inputs to combined heat and power plants from carbon tax, as these plants demonstrate by far the most efficient use of energy in electricity generation. It is expected that this relief will benefit a significant number of heat and power plants in different parts of the country that provided over 7% of the nation's electricity in 2014. The Revenue Commissioners have a difficult but necessary job in securing the resources needed to fund the public expenditure that underpins our public services. It is a role that they perform very well, but from time to time as tax evasion evolves and tax issues become evident, the Revenue Commissioners seek additional powers and resources. The release of the so-called Panama Papers earlier this year showed how defaulters use offshore structures and accounts to avoid paying tax. International developments and agreements are leading to better sharing of information. In the Finance Bill, I will act to restrict the opportunity for offshore defaulters to use the voluntary disclosure regime with effect from May of next year, and I will introduce a new strict liability criminal offence to facilitate the prosecution of serious cases of offshore tax evasion. I am pleased to announce the allocation of an additional €5 million to the Revenue Commissioners for the recruitment of 50 additional staff and additional investment in systems and equipment. The Revenue Commissioners are also launching a consultation process today that is intended to lead to a fundamental redesign and modernisation of the PAYE system. The aim is to help employees manage their tax affairs better, reduce contact between employers and revenue, reduce administrative costs for both employers and revenue, and improve compliance and provide up-to-date information for policymakers. I want to inform the House that I intend to introduce a tax on sugar-sweetened drinks. It is of utmost importance to me that such a tax is as effective as possible, as fair as possible, and minimises the administrative burden on business. Given the highly integrated production and supply chains which exist in the soft drinks industry between Ireland and the United Kingdom, I believe it would be prudent to align the Irish sugar-sweetened drinks tax with the UK's tax proposal in terms of time frame and structure. Therefore, I intend to introduce this tax to coincide with the introduction of its UK counterpart in April of 2018. However, much analysis needs to be undertaken between now and then. Therefore, I am announcing today a public consultation process which will run until the 3rd of January next year. The consultation paper is published on my department's website today, and I am inviting interested stakeholders to make submissions in relation to the form and practical implementation issues of the text. In line with the recognition that pricing is a key means to reducing tobacco consumption, I am increasing excise duty on a pack of 20 cigarettes by 50 cents. With a pro rata increase, with a pro rata increase on other tobacco products. This will bring the price of cigarettes in the most popular price category to €11 per package of 20. You'll be pleased to hear that this is the only tax increase in today's budget. Shortly after I took office in March of 2011, the CSO announced that the headline deficit for 2010 was 32% of GDP, and even on an underlying basis that excluded banking-related transactions, it was still over 12% of GDP. Today we are forecasting a deficit of just 0.4% of GDP in 2017. In March 2011, Ireland was no longer able to borrow on the open market. We were dependent on the EU IMF programme loans to keep us going. 10-year bond yields peaked at 14% in July of 2011, where only last month the NTMA was able to issue 10-year Irish bonds at a yield of 0.33%, and it is issuing Treasury notes at present at negative interest rates. In March 2011, employment was already at 14.3%, on its way to peaking at over 15% in January of 2012. Now it is 7.9%, and the new jobs I mentioned earlier will help to reduce it further next year. So, colleagues, we have come a long way, and the objective set in our medium-term fiscal policy of a balanced budget is within our reach, provided we continue to act responsibly and implement prudent fiscal policy. Separate from the fiscal rules and our obligations under the Stability and Growth Pact and the Fiscal Compact, the fiscal policy we are following makes sense. We are a small and very open economy in a world that has more risks than usual. It makes sense to complete the task we set ourselves to get to a balanced budget. It makes sense to continue reducing our debt to much lower levels and to build our capacity to withstand shocks. It makes sense to avoid the mistakes of the past that could lead to overheating our economy. In an uncertain world full of risk, now is not the time to move away from the prudent and sensible fiscal policies we have been following and quite obviously are yielding very positive results. My department's forecast and those of all other bodies project continued, steady and sustainable economic growth. It is our collective duty to protect that growth, because it is the best way to continue repairing the damage done to our economy in the past, and to ensure that we can look forward to a new Ireland with an equitable tax system that provides sustainable funding for efficient and effective world-class public services. Today's announcements are the first step on a new road by a new government. Subsequent budgets will travel further down that road in accordance with the programme for partnership government and the support of the Oireachtas. I commend the budget to the House.
Noonan. I now call on the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Deputy Pascal Doonahues, to make his statement on the estimates. Minister.
Ceann Comhairle. In making my first estimate statement to the Dáil, I am aware that my responsibility differs greatly from that of my predecessor in his first year in office. In 2011, Deputy Howland was faced with announcing a very significant reduction in spending for 2012. Making decisions during this time of crisis was tough. But toughest of all were the circumstances facing communities and families during an era of a bailout programme, a banking crisis, a surge in joblessness and forced immigration from our country. Due to such choices, I am now in a position to continue into 2017 the process of reinvestment in our country's future that began in 2014. The expenditure estimates that I am presenting this afternoon represent increases in current spending of almost €4 billion since we reversed the downward spend and spiral in spending in 2014. This recovery in current spending has been achieved alongside remarkable growth in investment in our economic and social infrastructure of 26% since 2014. And due to the sacrifices of the Irish people, we are back on the pathway to a dynamic economy and to a just and fair society. But fairness is, of course, about the relative distribution of income in our society. But it is also about improving services for our people and treating all members of our communities well. It is also about investment in education and improving our health services. It is about opportunities to work in a good job, to run your own business if you choose to, and to live in a good home and in a safe community while caring for your family, whatever shape that family may take. The opportunity for a sustainable, for a prosperous future must not be squandered by reckless spending or by investing poorly. And the decisions announced today are rooted firmly in that sense of responsibility. The spending priorities that I am now setting out are the starting point of the delivery of our ambition for this country and its people. These announcements represent a staging post in the first of at least 3 budgets. They will continue to strengthen our economy and our society to meet the challenges we face and to benefit from the opportunities we create. So the €58 billion which I am announcing today is made up of, firstly, the €53.5 billion in current day-to-day spending, equivalent to almost €11,500 for every man, woman and child in this country. And then €4.5 billion in capital spending to deliver the ongoing programme of investment in the government's capital plan. In total, this is an increase of €1.9 billion, or 3.3% on an expected outturn in 2016. This is at a time when the economy is forecast to grow by over 4.5% in nominal terms. So the allocation of these very substantial resources in the estimates underpins key public services by impacting on almost every aspect of our lives. They not only strengthen and support our economy, but they strengthen and support our society. The proposed additional recruitment of close to 4,500 additional frontline staff, such as nurses, Gardaí and teachers, is a clear demonstration of the government's commitment to ensuring that increased spending translates into real improvements in the lives of people. But economic growth and the increased availability of resources for more spending was, prior to our crisis, taken for granted. The cost of that approach seared our state. Sustainable spending simply means a government prioritising what we can afford among the actions that contribute most to strengthening our economy and creating a fairer society. The litmus test of that approach is that increased spending will take place, and that takes place in 2017, is affordable in that year, in 2018 and beyond. The unsustainable spending increase of today is the savage, socially destructive spending cut of tomorrow. So I therefore make no apology for anchoring today's spending decisions on three key pillars. Firstly, spending that we are confident that we can afford now and into the future, making progress to a fairer society and protecting our economy, particularly on account of the uncertainty caused by Brexit. And just as every household in the country needs to balance what goes out with what comes in, we in government need to work within what is financially feasible, because this is not our money, it is the public's money. The budgetary landscape has undoubtedly improved significantly, reflecting the careful stewardship of the finances of our country. However, the many competing priorities and demands for resources reinforces the compelling need for more effective and more efficient public spending. And as Minister, I have consistently reiterated the need to consider the totality of spending when examining budget priorities. Spending reviews previously played an important role in our efforts to reverse unsustainable expenditure growth. The purpose of future reviews will be to ensure that all expenditure is examined when government is deciding on its priorities. Better information and stronger evaluations should guide and inform these decisions. So I am today announcing that a comprehensive spending review will be carried out in advance of Budget 2018. The decisions that I am outlining today, Count Corlett, are born of the programme for partnership government, agreed with my independent colleagues. Many believed that the government would not be in place by the time budget day arrived. And yes, here we are. We are here because all of my colleagues have rooted our approach within the framework of our agreed government programme. We, of course, cannot implement all our measures in our supply and confidence agreement or in the programme for government in a single year or in a single budget. But today represents a substantial beginning. We are aware of the continued difficulty facing many individuals and families at the present time. Despite economic growth, too many are still without work. Despite economic growth, many public services still need improvement. However, because of economic growth, we have the resources to make a difference. And while many aspects of our economy are recovering, our country is not yet recovered. Fractures within our society remain to be healed. And the measures that I am announcing today respond directly to that need by continuing the process of rebuilding and restoring our public services. And in so doing, we are consistent with the broader economic, fiscal and expenditure strategy outlined by Minister Noonan. This strategy, embedded in both the programme for government and our confidence and supply agreement, is aligned with the EU Stability and Growth Pact. This gives us the confidence for international investors and indigenous Irish business people alike, from the corner shop owner to the tech start-up entrepreneur, that the government is serious about protecting and building the economy in which they operate. It also yields the resources we need for increased investment in public services, which I will now set out to the House. Housing is a core priority of the programme for partnership government, and I am today committing some €1.2 billion in funding for housing to the Department for Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government in 2017. This is to allow for the continued implementation of the Housing Action Plan. 47,000 new social homes will be delivered by 2021. The capital allocation also includes an allocation of €50 million for the €200 million Local Infrastructure Housing Activation Fund to accelerate the provision of local public infrastructure to support the development of key sites. It has the potential to facilitate the delivery of up to 20,000 private homes by 2019 through cooperation with local authorities. From July of this year, the Government increased rent thresholds for the housing assistance payment and rent supplement. This was to make it easier for people to access housing and to protect those in danger of becoming homeless. Today I am providing an additional €105 million for the Housing Assistance Payment Scheme. This brings the budget for this purpose to nearly €153 million, an increase of 220% compared to 2016. This will enable an additional 15,000 households to avail of this payment, and together with the capital allocation provided for housing and other measures, will mean that over 21,000 applicants for social housing will have their housing needs met next year. And I am also increasing the allocation for emergency accommodation for homeless people by an additional €28 million to also €100 million. Health is also a core priority of our programme, and I am announcing increased spending of €497 million for health in the estimates for 2017. This will bring total spending for this department to €14.6 billion. Taking account of the supplementary funding provided mid-year, this amounts to a commitment by Government of an additional €1 billion, or a 7.4% increase in health spending from budget 2016. This huge level of increased investment not only continues the process of putting our health service on a sustainable footing, it also represents the highest ever level of health funding in the history of our country. But with this increase comes great responsibility. The job of those charged with managing our health services is to ensure that taxpayers' money is used in such a way that outcomes are delivered, that budgets are adhered to, and that services are protected. So the Government will continue to work in the months and years ahead to ensure that this twin-track agenda of better care and better accountability is delivered. And we do so because we are committed to protecting our most vulnerable. And it is because of this that I am increasing medical card coverage to all children in receipt of the domiciliary care allowance. I am reducing the €25 cap on prescription charges for over 70-year-olds to €20 with effect from the 1st of March, and I am allocating an additional €15 million to the NTPF, the National Treatment Purchase Fund, to reduce waiting lists. Further details will be announced by my colleague, the Minister for Health. And I now turn to education, which is the bedrock of our society, because the desire for educational success resonates deeply with all of us. Since the introduction of free secondary education in 1966, the ongoing positive impact of that historic decision have been manifest in the proportion of our young people completing higher education. There is no sector of our economy, no aspect of our society, no element of our national life that has not been transformed by the increased educational attainment of our people. But we must continue to reinforce this transformation through investment. The education spending that I am announcing this afternoon of €9.5 billion is approximately 16% of total spending. The increase in spending of €458 million will fund an extensive programme of recruitment in 2017, including an additional 2,500 teaching posts, of which 900 will be resource teachers. During our discussions on the budget and listening to debate here in the Dáil, my colleagues and I were very conscious of the importance of the third level sector. For this reason, Budget 2017 sees an increase of €36.5 million in funding for the higher and further education sector in 2017. It represents the first significant investment of resources in higher education since our economic collapse. Earlier this year, the Cassell's report highlighted the economic and societal value of higher education and the scale of the challenge involved. It pointed to the availability of funding from three sources: the Exchequer, students and some form of employer contribution. Ensuring that education remains the linchpin of our economic success now requires an intensified focus on a sustainable long-term model for higher and further education, and I am committed to this goal and committed to building on the significant investment of education announced now. The Minister for Education and Skills and I are therefore initiating a consultation process and the design and operation of an Exchequer employer investment mechanism to operate from 2018 onwards. This is intended to drive continued reform, quality and performance across this sector in line with the action plan for education. I expect that this proposal will be brought to Government by the middle of next year following conclusion of consultation. The Government is also very clear on the benefits of higher quality and more affordable childcare. It is good for children, good for families and good for our economy. In light of the value attached to further supporting the development of affordable childcare in Ireland, early years funding will rise from €345 million in 2016 to €465 million in 2017, an increase of 35%. This increase will allow for an additional €35 million to support the provision of both universal and targeted services for the care, development and well-being of children and young people. It will allow for the introduction of a single and new affordable childcare scheme from September of next year to provide both means test subsidies based on parental income for children between 6 months and 15 years and universal subsidies for all children aged between 6 months and 3 years. These subsidies will be paid for children and young people attending a TUSLA registered childcare provider, including centre-based providers and childminders. Taken together, these initiatives represent a major step forward in the provision of childcare. And in addition to this package, €86 million has been provided in respect of the full year cost of the extended early childcare care and education scheme, the free preschool scheme and the rollout of the access and inclusion model to enable children with disabilities to participate in preschool education. Our system of social welfare supports is a vital protection against the uncertainty of employment, the hardship caused by illness or disability and the challenges that one encounters when caring for a loved one. I am pleased to be able to inform the House that the state pension will rise by €5 per week from March. However, in framing a fair budget, we cannot stop at that. The previous government worked to protect, as far as was possible, the basic rates of weekly social welfare payments. Nonetheless, it has been 7 years since many of these payments were increased. The collapse of the economy meant we could not increase such payments. The return of growth and the economic recovery of the last couple of years are the reason why we can now afford to begin to change this. Carers, the unemployed, those living in disabilities may not always have the loudest voices, but their needs are no less real. And in framing this budget, my government colleagues and I were very conscious of this, conscious of the need to ensure that the benefits of this recovery were felt by all. So for this reason, as part of an overall package worth an additional €301 million, all weekly social welfare payments, including the carers allowance, disability allowance, job seekers benefit and allowance, will rise by €5 per week in line with the increase in the state pension. These payments will rise in March, subject to the passage of the Social Welfare Bill. In addition, I am pleased to announce the payment of an 85% Christmas bonus for social welfare recipients in 2016. Many of those in receipt of these payments were our most vulnerable citizens. We cannot have a just society if we leave them behind. There will also be improvements in other schemes, including Farm Assist, as well as 500 new places in the Rural Social Scheme. Further details will be announced by my colleague, the Minister for Social Protection, today. In the justice area, the safety and security of our citizens is fundamental. We have committed to increasing the number of Gardaí in the force to 15,000. Today's estimates support this through an allocation of an additional €28 million for An Garda Síochána to bring to a total package of measures of €68 million, bringing total funding for justice and equality to over €2.5 billion. The government is committed to a 5-year reform and investment strategy for An Garda Síochána, under which a phased increase in resource levels will go hand in hand with the implementation of a far-reaching programme of reform. The Taoiseach will introduce an accelerated programme of Garda recruitment, with 800 new Gardaí to be hired and trained in 2017. There will also be an accelerated recruitment of civilian staff into An Garda Síochána to help address capacity shortfalls and free up a large number of desk-bound, trained officers for frontline duties. Funding is also included in the allocation to support the continuation of key operations by An Garda Síochána in response to gangland and rural crime. Large spending areas such as these, such as social protection, health, education, are of course vital importance, and it is right that the majority of the Exchequer's resources should focus on those areas. However, it is also true that we should support our more diverse sectors, and this budget sees important developments for our arts and sporting sectors. Nobody could be anything but impressed at the tremendous series of events that took place in 2016 to mark the centenary of the Easter Rising. This could not have happened without the talent and vibrancy of our artistic community, who in 2016 were granted €49 million to stage such an impressive programme of cultural events. So this is why a significant portion of that funding will remain within the arts budget for 2017 to ensure that that legacy lives on. And in relation to sport, I am happy to announce that there will be a new round of the Sports Capital Programme in 2017, and the Ministers at the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport will announce the details of this programme in due course. Turning to defence, 498 Defence Force personnel are currently participating in 11 missions around the world, including and doing our country proud in vital search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean Sea. So Budget 2017 rightly sees an increase in spending on our defence forces, with an additional funding of €16 million being allocated to that department. So in this year we have reflected on the legacy of 1916 and the impact it had on our history and on our country. But we now turn our attention to our future and to the challenges we may face in the years to come. And of course, Brexit presents such challenges for us on many fronts. Exchange rates remain volatile. This impacts on trade. We have to begin a complex set of negotiations along with our EU partners, and the range of issues that will be dealt with will emerge over time. We will be supporting industry both to meet these challenges and to take advantage of any opportunities that may arise. So, for example, we will increase spending in the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine by some €119 million. Within this, we continue to invest in Foodwise 2025 to aid the development of our agri-food sector and to strengthen it in the face of what could be more difficult market conditions for our exporters to Britain. With a plan to grow the number of jobs supported by our enterprise agencies, additional resources have been provided, primarily for staff resources for Enterprise Ireland and IDA Ireland in the context of Brexit. This is to provide further support to these vital agencies in assisting indigenous companies to attract and in attracting overseas investment in a business environment that provides both challenges and opportunities. The Department of the Taoiseach and the Revenue Commissioners will receive additional funding to navigate the challenges of Brexit, and this work is in addition to the establishment of a Brexit team within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade within their existing resources. The estimates allocation across key departments for 2017 also provides the resources required to quickly build expertise, capacity and capability on a cross-departmental basis to deliver our Brexit-ready strategy. And while it has implications for us all, it is our rural and our regional communities who may be looking with most anxiety to the triggering of Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty by the British Government. This is a reflection of the concerns of people in some parts of our country where alternative employment may be scarce, where they to lose their job, or where investment has been historically lower than in our larger cities. And when this government was formed, we paid particular attention to rural Ireland, and our budget today reflects our determination to help those communities. We cannot allow the threat of imbalanced regional development to endanger our economic growth. This is why we have increased funding for the Rural Development Programme by €107 million, from €494 million in 2016 to €601 million in 2017. This includes, for example, provision of €25 million for a new animal welfare scheme for sheep to support Ireland's vitally important sheep sector. Similarly, we have increased funding to the Department of Arts, Heritage, Regional, Rural and Gaeltacht Affairs to help fund the action plan on rural development due to be published at the end of this year. There is also increased funding for the LEADER programme and for Údarás na Gaeltachta. And we are committing €15 million to progress the procurement of the National Broadband Plan to provide high-speed broadband to areas of rural Ireland where commercial investment is not forthcoming. These vitally important increases are part of today's story. However, the other crucial element is the development of our physical infrastructure. And I have already spoken about both the current and capital investment we are making to improve our housing stock. However, I am announcing a total package of over €4.5 billion across a range of departments, representing an increase of almost €400 million on the 2016 outturn, and reflecting solid progress in implementing the government's capital plan, Building in Recovery and On Recovery, which was published in 2015. This represents an increase of 26% in capital expenditure in comparison to 2014. It includes, for example, in transport, expenditure of €319 million in regional and local roads throughout our country. It includes funding to provide for the opening of Lewis Cross City by the end of next year, and the continued rollout of improvements and construction of national road projects, including 3 major PPP projects: Gore to Toome, Gorey to Enniscorthy and the New Ross bypass. These projects are vital and they are being delivered. And I am also very much aware of the country's responsibilities to work against the changing climate of our planet and the hugely negative environmental and social consequences that it brings. And for this reason, amongst others, there is an increased allocation to the new Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment. In terms of capital funding in particular, the department will see an increase of almost €50 million, or 41%. This is contributed towards carbon reduction, energy efficiency and renewable targets through measures such as the Renewable Heat Scheme, Better Energy Grant Scheme and the Electric Vehicle Subsidy, with a total of €90 million for these schemes. It will reduce the environmental impact of heating our homes, support efficiency in the business and public sectors, assist those in energy poverty and enhance the affordability and attractiveness of electric vehicles. We are also increasing funding to the Green Low Carbon Agri-Environmental Scheme, or GLOS, within the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine by €69 million to €211 million, with an expected total number of participants standing at 50,000 next year. Of course, an important way to reduce our carbon emissions is through greater use of public transport and a reduced dependence on private transport. This will be a key priority in the capital plan and will continue to be when the plan comes to be reviewed. Deputies are aware that since the publication of this plan, better conditions have allowed us to increase total spend by over €5 billion, bringing the total amount of state-backed investment, to include state companies, to over €47 billion. Our priorities over the next number of years include major transport projects such as Lewis Cross City, the new Metro North, DART expansion, major health projects like the new National Children's Hospital, a new National Maternity Hospital, a new National Forensic Mental Health Hospital and a number of oncology units. We also have a major nationwide schools building programme in place to meet the demands of a growing population. And there are major flood relief schemes for Cork, for Enniscorthy, planned to commence construction as part of a €44 million package for flood relief schemes. It is important to realise, however, that this plan must be adaptable to meet our changing needs. And in this context, I am bringing forward the capital review, and work on this will commence now. I will be in a position to bring a revised and more ambitious programme of capital investment to the House next year. But of course, increases in investment and sustainable management of public service pay are two sides of the same coin. Today's budget includes the provision of €290 million for pay increases agreed under the Lansdowne Road Agreement. They are currently being provided to civil and public servants following the huge sacrifices they made at the start of and during the crisis. This allowed us to get our public pay bill under control, to reform our public services so that they are better for the users of those services and, I hope, better places within which to work. Public pay constraint has been the cornerstone of our strategy to repair our public finances. Without such restraint, we would not now be in a position to provide extra funding to health, to education and to childcare as we are now doing. And of course I am aware of the demands that exist in the area of public pay. Public pay restoration, however, must be managed in a way that is affordable for all. For those working in our public services and those who depend on those services and depend on future investment in more frontline staff and resources. So I intend to set in motion the next phase in this process by establishing a Public Service Pay Commission. This commission will report to me by the middle of next year and provide inputs on how the unwinding of the financial emergencies measure in the public interest legislation should proceed. The work of this commission will facilitate my engagement with public service unions and other stakeholders on the successor to the Lansdowne Road Agreement. And in this way, we can continue to provide a sustainable and quality public services that are affordable for all. Ceann Comhairle, I began my speech this afternoon with a reference to the fundamental shift in our economic environment. In the face of the worst economic and fiscal crisis in our history, the Irish people adopted a resolute and a resilient approach. In the same way, I strongly believe we can and we will rise to the challenge of Brexit. And indeed, we can continue to build opportunity in cases where others see risk. This can certainly be achieved by adopting a shared commitment to the values of strengthening our economy, safeguarding our public finances, and creating a fairer society. These values underpin the reality of the substantial investment in public services which this government has delivered in this budget. The improvements in our public services that this investment will make possible have the simple, the basic and the most important goal of endeavouring to make life better for all, but especially our most vulnerable. Some on the opposition benches claim that the very act of governing, of making choices, is a desire to create an economy and a society where some gain and some lose, as opposed to what it truly is, an attempt to create a better collective future for us all. And the spending increases that I am announcing today in such areas as health, housing, education and childcare are testament to how this better future can be secured and safeguarded. Those of us in the middle ground of politics have a duty to show that cooperation and consensus can work, to show that our tone can be moderate but still convincing, to show that things won't just fall apart, but that the centre can and will hold, will stay firm, will grow. And it is in this spirit that this partnership government was formed, and it is in this spirit that I command these estimates to the House today.
Thank you very much, Minister Donoghue. We now proceed to responses.